stream. So I'm very happy to introduce Kalin Stefanov today. I first met Kalin during his PhD studies at KTH in Sweden, and during that period he was also visiting researchers at the Institute of Creative Technologies at the University of Southern California, and he was with the Computer Vision and Discrete Geometry group at the National Institute of Informatics in Tokyo, Japan. After his graduation, he was a research associate and postdoctoral research scholar at the University of Southern California. And that was until maybe 1 month ago. And now he recently moved to Monash University in Melbourne, Australia, where he's a research fellow. And Kalin has been working with analyzing and modeling multimodal spoken interaction, both human-human interaction and between humans and robots. And as you know, human communication involves much more than just words. And Kalin, in my opinion, has given significant contributions in collecting very complex data sets of spoken interaction and building machine learning models on this data. And in this talk, it will focus on a very specific topic that is detecting the active speaker in the conversation, also called voice activity detection. But I believe it will also give a broader overview of the kind of problems he has been addressing in the last years. And I want to say I'm particularly grateful to Kalin that he accepted this invitation. First of all, because it just, as I mentioned before, he just moved to Australia. So it's a very busy period for him. But also because it's over 11 in the night in Melbourne. So this is a bit challenging, I think, for him. So without taking more time, please welcome Kalin Stefanov.
Thank you for the introduction, Joppy. Let me share my screen. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Kalin. And today in this talk, I'm gonna present our efforts towards building robust voice activity, vision-based voice activity detection method. And as Jumpy already mentioned, so essentially voice activity detection is a simple task, is like a binary classification problem. The idea is that we want to detect a certain speaker, whether he or she is active at any point in time. This is the goal in general of voice activity detection. So I will just straight away give you a feeling of how exactly this problem looks like in the sense of vision-based voice activity detection. I prepared these 2 videos just to illustrate the problem. So if we want to teach a computer or machine to detect whether somebody is talking or not based only on visual input, we can expect that the machine is going to get something similar to one of these 2 videos, and I'll play one of them. I removed the sound from them so we can get a better feeling of what kind of information goes into the potential algorithm, which will decide whether that person in the video is talking or not. And this seems, I'm going to play the other one as well. This seems very trivial task for humans. For me, at least, it's very easy to say. So in one video, the speaker is talking, and the other video, the speaker is listening. And for me, this is very, very simple, kind of easy, intuitive to say, yes, the left one, the person is speaking, and in the right one, the person is listening. However, it turns out that this is a difficult task for a computer to accomplish. And I'm going to go into details why it's this difficult later on. First, I would like to spend some time on motivating why voice activity detection in general is important problem to solve. So let's consider some more general motivation where we look at machines involved in multi-party social interactions. And here on this slide, I'm listing like the most general types of multi-party social interactions that we're involved in every day. So these are either some type of exchange where we interact in order to receive some type of award, or it's some type of competition where people are gonna get involved in some competitive behavior in order to achieve a goal only for so they're going to oppose each other in only one person or only one entity takes achieves the goal and nobody else. Or we're going to get engaged in conflict, which is usually when one person or a group of people try to control other people by force. Other forms of social interactions involve cooperation. This is essentially when people work together to achieve a certain goal. And finally, accommodation, which is essentially just a balance between cooperation and conflict. So these are essentially very, very complex situations and interactions. And of course, modeling this type of interactions is a very complicated and difficult problem. But the point I'm trying to make here is that in order for a machine to get engaged in something similar, this machine is going to need to be able to reason about when somebody is talking and who that person is when actually somebody is actually talking. So it's not only detecting who is talking, but also localizing the person or persons who are talking. And to go a little bit more into more specific motivation for this work is if we, let's say, the machine is already interacting with the people or the group of people. I'm going to talk mostly for multi-party interactions. So we use a lot of like communicative signals. I call them communicative signals. So these are either hand movements or facial movements or body movements or gaze and things like that, which we use to signal to cue our intentions during a face-to-face interaction. So these communicative signals are very subtle, and humans are in general very good in understanding them and anticipating future actions based on what kind of communicative signals are being provided during the interaction in real time. But one thing about the signals is that they actually have different functions depending on the state. Many of them have different functions depending on the state of the person who is producing them. And by state, I mean whether that person is talking or not talking. And as you can see, for example, hair gesture recognition has been like a very well-studied problem, and people still study it. But I want to emphasize on a problem of visual attention. So essentially, visual attention is the function of visual attention in face-to-face interaction is modulated by the actual role, the person who is sending the signals plays in the interaction. And visual attention has been shown that it's a very good way to regulate the conversational flow. That's it. So the interplay between a speaker and listener and like a bystander and like all the people who are participating in the current conversation. And visual attention is, as well as hand gestures and facial expressions, have been used to actually model this conversational flow. So we have like a very smooth and natural interaction between the participants. So from that point of view, machine which is able to detect who is talking and what the role of that person is, and on top of that, able to reason about these additional communicative signals which come together with the speaking or not speaking state. This type of machine or a computer is going to be able to kind of interact with humans in these more complicated situations in more natural way, in a way that humans would expect and can actually reason about the intent of the machine, but also the machine can reason about, for example, turn-taking management, prediction of turn-taking, and dynamics like that, which are involved in this type of interactions. And this is a little bit different motivation from the previous two, but we've looked, one of the studies that I'm going to present later, we looked at spoken language acquisition. So spoken language acquisition, one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest challenges in spoken language acquisition is called referential ambiguity. And essentially, referential ambiguity means that, so the idea of spoken language acquisition is that infants can form word referent mappings. So essentially, when they hear a word, they can form a mapping between the spoken word and an object in the scene. And in that way, they can acquire language, or at least acquire words for different objects and things in their surroundings. The problem, though, which comes here is that for every heard word in the environment, there are too many possible objects or reference in that environment. This is why we end up with this referential ambiguity. So for any heard word, there are actually many candidates to map to in the visual environment. And there, in this domain, there are two theories about how referential ambiguity is resolved in infants. And the first one is called individualistic learning, which is essentially the idea that across learning scenarios, so there is one scenario now, the infant hears a word and has a set of objects, and then after half an hour or the next day, there is another learning scenario, the infant hears the same word and there are other objects, but one of these objects is again in the environment. So the individualistic learning idea is that infants can essentially aggregate statistics about co-occurrences of words and reference across different learning scenarios. And in this way, they can actually form these word referent mappings in their brain. Another way of acquiring language might be related to social learning. And social learning, essentially, the idea of social learning is that the infant is going to use some kind of cues from the caregiver in order to disambiguate the referential ambiguity. And I'll give you an example because it's easier to understand what it means. So if the caregiver says, look at the ball, and points at the ball and looks at the ball when the caregiver says, look at the ball, social learning idea says that the infant can hear the word ball and associate that word with the social signals that I talked about in the previous slide, like the gaze and the pointing gesture. So can create this word ball referent, the actual physical object in the environment, can create this connection between these two things, these two modalities. So again, in this example, what comes as an important component of if we have for example, a machine which attempts to acquire language, spoken language automatically, is that this machine, regardless of in which whether it's doing social learning or individualistic learning, this machine is going to need to be able to do accurate voicetivity detection in order to create these word referent mappings. So then the question is, why do we want to do vision-based voicetivity detection? Since essentially the auditory modality is the fundamental for voicetivity detection task. And we with the examples that I gave and our motivation, I hope it's already evident that in certain scenarios, audio-only methods are gonna have really difficult time to actually perform. And this could be because of a high level of environmental noise, but it could be also because of multiple speakers. If you remember the picture I showed at the beginning, there were groups of people talking to each other. So there are many people, there is overhearing of other speakers. So there could be also some other like noises, like animal noises and other type of noises which come to the environment. And there could be also like instrumental noises, like computers and any type of appliance that is in that environment. So all these different types of noises gonna create a very challenging environment for audio-only method. So our idea is that we want to exploit the visual modality for voice detection. From one side, to enhance the audio-only voice detection, because as I said, of course, the auditory modality is a fundamental for the task, but in some cases, it's not going to perform as well as we expect. And also exploit the visual modality in order to improve the voice source localization. So if you remember, I said it's not only for a machine to get engaged in interaction, it's not only enough to detect that somebody is talking, but also it needs to know who is talking. So it needs to localize the source. And then the ultimate goal of this work at some point in the future is that we're going to have a robust multimodal voice activity detector and localization process, which combines auditory modality and visual modality and probably other modalities which are helpful for that task. So this is the outline of the talk. I just went through the introduction. Next, I'm going to talk about how do we record this type of multimodal spoken interaction data and the data that we've recorded previously and used in some of our studies. After that, I'm going to talk about some models that we developed for voice activity detection and discuss the results of those models. And then I'm going to talk about our newest work, which is with respect to bias that we found in this type of data sets, multi-party, multimodal data sets. And then I'm going to conclude the talk with some discussion on future directions. So the first part is going to be on recording multimodal spoken interactions, and evidently we need data to examine and to look at in order to be able to build some kind of a detector. So first step that we've taken is to record some kind of data that we can use for these purposes and others. I'm going to present two data sets. The first one is called, or I call it, Timeline Quiz Dataset. And in this data set, so the overall goal is to have this multimodal recording of natural multi-party interactions. And we kind of wanted to have also like different conditions in which the participants in the data set interact with each other. So in this particular data set, we had three different conditions. In the first condition, so there were two humans playing a game, this timeline quiz game, with a robot. In the second condition, the robot was replaced by a third human, and they played again several rounds of timeline quiz game. And in the third condition, the same three people just engaged in what we call open world dialogue. So it's essentially dialogue without any task. We just exchange information, ask questions. It's just a free three-party dialogue. The first and the second conditions involve interaction with the touch surface. So the participants are sitting around the table, and there is a touch surface in between. And on that touch surface, they engage in solving this quiz. And here on this screen, I'm showing example of a question. The question is to order the planets by size from left to right, from the smallest to the largest. And then the participants, the two participants need to discuss with each other and use the robot to give them hints and give them ideas in the first condition, or use the third human in the second condition in order to reach the correct solution of the quiz. And this is how actually it looks like. This is stylized version of the setup. So we have the three participants, and we have a lot of data collected in that data set. So we have 3 streams of audio data, which are generated by these closed OQ microphones. We have 3 streams of eye gaze data. These are generated by the Tobii eyeglasses, which all of them are wearing, not the robot in the first interaction, of course, in the first condition. Then we have 3 streams of Kinect data. So this is color, depth, infrared, body, and face. So the 3 Kinect, which are pointing at each of the participants. 3 streams of video data, the 3 GoPros on top of the Kinects, which are again pointing at each of the participants. We have 1 stream of game state data for the first and the second condition. So this is the touch screen that I was mentioning here in between them. And then we have 1 stream for the robot state data for condition 1. The robot was situated down here. In total, we have 23 unique participants here on this side of the table, plus 1 participant who is always the same in all the interaction. That participant is the moderator of all the interactions. We have in total 15 interactions, the 3 conditions that I just mentioned, and 9 hours of data per device. So essentially 9 hours for this person, 9 hours for this person, and 9 hours for this position here as well. The data was, so it's, I don't know if you have collected multimodal data set with a lot of sensors and a lot of computers, and it becomes really, really difficult to synchronize and align. But we managed to synchronize and align this data. So essentially, we actually did even calibration, and we can do reconstructions like this from each frame. Actually, I have a nice figure for this one. So essentially, we can reconstruct what happened during that particular frame in the interaction, and essentially the whole interaction. So here we have the 3 Kinects and their position in space. The region of the world is defined in the middle of the interaction surface, which is the touch screen between the participants, and then the location and the orientation of the faces or the heads of all the participants is reconstructed based on this calibration data that we use for the Kinects. Now I'm going to move to the second data set that I want to discuss. So this data set is, again, the goal, the motivation for it is to have multimodal recording of natural multi-party interactions. However, in this case, we have only 2 conditions. So in 1 condition, again, 3 people, there is no robot in this data set. There are just 3 people. So in the first condition, 3 people are going to interact with each other in order to place furniture in an apartment that they're about to move in together. And then in the second condition, they're again involved in free-form three-party dialogue. For this data set, the sensors that we have are a little bit different, and the data that we have is a little bit different, but the spatial configuration is very similar to the previous data set. We have these three people. We have again the audio streams from the closed talking microphones. We have the eye gaze data from the Tobii eye trackers. We have this type, only two streams of video data, these two GoPros here on the table. The game state data, which is the touch surface. And then we have a motion capture system, these cameras around. So we have all these things, essentially the Kinect replaced with a much more precise way of determining the 3D coordinate of everything in the space. So what we have is we can track the head with very high precision. We can also track the hands. There's some small sensors I drew here, hope you can see them. So we can also see the gestures that people, or we can get information about the gestures that people are doing while they interact with each other. This data set is it's bigger. It has 30 participants, unique participants on this side, plus one participant down here, the moderator. In total, again, 15 interactions, the two conditions that I just mentioned, this time 15 hours per recording device. So for each participant, we have 15 hours. So each session is about 1 hour. And I'll just give you an example of reconstruction of the Tobii gaze data. So you can get an idea of how it looks like. So this is the data generated by the Tobii devices. Here is the moderator, this cloud here. This is how the moderator was moving during the whole interaction. So this is the data for a full interaction. This is how the moderator was moving in his head during the interaction. I believe this blue spot here is the one of the participants, and this red one is the other participant. And you can see these bursts behind, like the blue participant, there is this black cloud. So this is when the moderator was gazing towards that person. We have similar pattern on this side when the moderator was gazing towards the red person, and we have similar clouds on this side when the red person was gazing towards the moderator. There is this red cloud in the back, and when the blue person was gazing, we have this blue cloud in the back. The depth of the Tobies is not very precise. This is well known. That's why we have all these like different depths in the data. But in general, we can see some kind of like patterns in how people use their gaze during an interaction based on that. But the most important thing is that we can actually put everything in the same space. Again, the origin, the frame of this reconstruction is the center of the touch surface, which is this rectangle here. Okay, as I mentioned before, it's really complicated to collect data from so many sensors and synchronize them with each other. So recently we've been working on a system which can do this for us with high precision. We just published it last month in ICMI. It's open source for and it's free for academic research. We call it OpenSense, and what it supports as many cameras as you want, as many microphones as you want, as many Kinect Azure, the new version of Kinect devices as you want, and also BioPack. This is a physiological collection, like a hardware for collecting physiological signals. And what it offers is very intuitive user interfaces to synchronize all these signals, but also it offers a lot of components for some kind of analysis on these signals. For example, it supports body tracking. So this is a component which can estimate skeleton from RGB data. It supports visual attention component. So there are a bunch of components here, which are essentially machine learning algorithms, which take as an input either one modality or multimodal data and generate as an output some estimate for different things. And I think the most powerful thing about the system is that it can synchronize essentially all the signals that are flowing into this. It's called computational graph from the device all the way down to these components, and further down the computational graph, all these streams of data can be synchronized with very high precision. And I'll show you a video of the user interface. I'll just stop it. There is this web camera here, and then we can do, I don't know if you can see, we can do face tracking. We can do emotion, like facial expression recognition. We can do head gesture recognition. This is head nods, head shakes, head tilts. We can do skeleton tracking, as I said, in the RGB data. On the audio side, we can, this is something which is called Open Smile. We can extract a lot of low-level acoustic features from the acoustic signal. And I'm plotting here some of the features that were selected. We can also do speech recognition. Here is the result of one speech recognizer. Here's the result of another speech recognizer. And then finally, here is a shows the output of a Kinect Azure device. So we have the RGB, but we also have the depth and the infrared from the Kinect device. Okay, please go on this repository and download it and use it for and let us know if you would like to get additional components, or there's any problems, or you would like to get more functionality. We'll be very happy to if people actually start using this for collecting. It's not only for collecting data, to be honest. Actually, it's also the other application of it is to actually use it in real time. It works as you can see from the video. It works in real time. So we can synchronize regardless of how much latency there is in any of these components. We can always down the line, we can synchronize the output of each of them and make sure that we reason on events which happened at exactly the same time before. So to recap, at the present, from all the data that I just presented, in the studies that are coming next, we just use the voice activity labels, which we extracted from the audio data, and the face images, the color face images from the video data. This is all the data that we have used so far in the next studies. And we always consider the participants in the interaction independently. So for the future, we definitely would like to consider the participants jointly, because they, of course, they're going to influence each other. If one person is talking, probably nobody else is talking, and things like that. But we also would like to consider additional information. For example, hand movements. We believe that there is a correlation between people gesturing and the voice activity. We also would like to consider head gestures, body gestures, visual attention, maybe prosody, and of course, additional modalities, for example, the depth. So all this is something that we are looking into and going to work on in the future. With this, I'm going to finish the description of the recorded data, and I'm going to move to some models of voice activity detection that we developed. So these models were developed in the study where we were looking at automatic spoken language acquisition. And the most important part of those models is that no data was actually labeled manually. So the data was, the labels were generated automatically. Here on the top, I'm showing the perceptual inputs. So everything was generated automatically in order to comply with the developmental constraints that, I mean, when infants acquire language, they essentially don't get labels for each word for the voice activity, whether somebody is talking or not. So they acquire that in an automatic way, unsupervised way. That's why we didn't label anything manually. We just ran the video through a face detection, and we got the face images, only the face of the person, and we ran the audio through a voice activity detector, and we got automatic labeling of the audio signal. And we developed in general 3 models. The first is a task-specific model where we train a convolutional neural network together with a perceptron classifier using the images and the labels. This is during training. And then in the prediction phase, of course, we don't use labels or audio. We use only the images, the model, and then the classifier. We also tried a transfer learning approach. We took off-the-shelf convolutional neural network, which is called VGG16. And during training, we just extract the visual embeddings from that model for the face images. And we use these embeddings together with the labels to train just a classifier. And during prediction, again, only images, the encoder, the convolutional neural network, the classifier, and then we obtain the prediction. Again, it's a binary classification problem, whether somebody is talking or not. That's the label out here and the label here. And finally, we also tried temporal learning. So the encoder is either the convolutional neural network that we developed or the pre-trained VGG16. And then again, the labels, the deep features. And then we train, instead of training a perceptron classifier, we train a long short-term memory model for a classification task. And then during prediction, only images, the encoder, and the temporal classifier to get the predictions. We performed essentially 3 experiments. One is a speaker-dependent experiment, the other one is a multi-speaker dependent, and last one is a speaker-independent. And everything was evaluated with weighted accuracy. And this weighted accuracy is giving us the flexibility to compare between different participants in the dataset, although the actually class distribution for different participants is different. This way of defining the accuracy actually gives us a baseline of 50% when we predict only one class, regardless of what the actual class distribution is, what's the actual underlying class distribution. And here are the results. Again, I want to stress on that we use automatic labels. So there is a noise already in the targets or in the labels that we use for training the models. Here on the left side is the speaker dependent case. We achieve something around 73–74% accuracy, just looking at the face image, predicting whether that person is talking or not. This is average over all 23 participants. So in this case, we use the first data set that I described at the beginning. So there are 23 participants plus one moderator. There are 24 in total participants. and this is average over all of them. Here we have the different models. For the LSTM, we used actually several different segment sizes. So either 15, 30, 150, or 300. This is in terms of frames with frame rate of 30 frames per second. So this is half second, 1 second, 5 seconds, and 10 seconds length of the segment for the LSTMs. Here is the multi-speaker dependent case. It's similar to the speaker dependent. So in the multi-speaker, we just put all speakers together and do the tenfold cross validation. Here we do the tenfold cross validation per speaker. And finally, we have the speaker independent results, which are much worse as expected. This one is a leave one out cross validation. So essentially it's train on 23 speakers and test on the 24th, which is left out. This figure just gives us a little bit more detail into the performance on specific on each of the speakers. And the main takeaway from this picture is that there is the variability between speakers is much bigger than the variability inside the speaker itself. What this means is that regardless of the model that we use, whether this is a CNN with perceptron or with LSTM or the VGGs, all 4 combinations per that speaker are going to perform similarly within the speaker. The variability between speakers, though, on the other hand, is much bigger, where we have so the speakers here are just sorted by the overall accuracy, and we have some speakers who achieve 85% accuracy and some speakers who achieve as low as 65% accuracy. So you can see that there is a very big variability between different speakers. Finally, what we did is we wanted to compare how this vision-based voice detection performs with comparison to acoustic-based voice detection. And we wanted to check where exactly is the benefit of vision-based voice detection in terms of noise, in environmental noise. So we injected a noise in the acoustic signal, and these are the results that we got. So in general, around signal to noise ratio 12, the vision-based voice detector and the audio-based voice detector perform equally. When the signal to noise ratio is lower, the vision-based voice detector is better, and vice versa. When the signal to noise ratio is higher than 12, then the audio-based voice detector actually performs better. This is the speaker-dependent case. In the multi-speaker dependent case, we have something similar, and in the speaker-independent case, which is the most difficult one, the audio-only voice detection performs mostly better than the video-only voice detection. The goal of this work is that we develop models which are plausible from the developmental cognitive system perspective. So there were no labeling. All the labels were obtained automatically. The pre-trained and task-specific encoders, our own convolutional neural network and VGG16, they actually perform very similarly. So essentially, we can use a pre-trained model. We don't need to train a specific model for each of the participants. We didn't see a big difference between the temporal and non-temporal classifiers. They perform similarly to each other. And then the speaker, multi-speaker, and the speaker-independent results, the biggest problem that we saw is that the models, they don't transfer to unseen speakers. And we started asking ourselves, why would that be? And one possible explanation of why this model didn't transfer to unseen speakers is probably coming from the topic that I'm going to discuss next, which is about bias in the data. And finally, we compared audio-only voice detection with video-only voice detection in presence of stationary acoustic noise. And here I need to mention that the noise that we injected in the acoustic signal is kind of favorable for the audio-only voicetivity detector because it's a stationary acoustic noise, and the audio-only voicetivity detector that we used actually uses like dynamic thresholding to adjust for this type of noise. So we expect that if we have more complicated noise patterns, for example, speech over hearing or other types of noises which are not stationary, the audio-only voice detector is actually going to perform worse than what we see here. Finally, I want to talk about our latest work on biasing in the data. So again, we use the first data set that I mentioned before. In this case, however, we wanted to check several things, mostly about the data and how the data influences very well-trained person, like one speaker specific model. So what we did is we defined several different levels of zoom, or for the input data, we call them frames, which is like a full frame of the face. Also aligns, which the background is removed and the face is a little bit aligned in size with the rest of the frames. We have only faces. This is a crop from the face tracker without removing these parts of the background and keeping the size. And we have lips, which is just the lip region around in the image. We also consider two types of inputs. One is a static type of input. So these are just the original images, which are again masked to a certain level. And we also consider dynamic inputs. So essentially the dynamic inputs, we use dynamic image networks to kind of summarize a sequence of frames into one frame. And we run that with the hop size of one frame. So actually the data with dynamic images, the size of the data set of the dynamic images, exactly the same size as the static images. But here you can see an example of some of the dynamic images that we got for these particular frames. Another thing that we considered in this study is essentially our hypothesis for this study was that when people are involved in this type of situated interaction, information about this physical setup is encoded in the data itself. So when we actually use that data to create a voicetivity detector, vision-based voicetivity detector, this bias, which is related to the physical configuration of the recording, is going to bias the classifier, and as a result, the classifier is not going to perform well when it actually sees a face from a very different configuration, from a very different distribution. And this is with respect with the head rotation. So what we did is here we have these graphs, the blue and the red. We measured the yaw angle of the participants. In this study, we are actually concentrating only on the moderator because we have the most data for that person, and we wanted to train a person-specific model to examine how this model is influenced by these different distributions of head rotations. So we divided all the data for that person into negative angles of head rotation. Again, this is the yaw rotation, and positive angles of head rotation. And later on, we're gonna try to train a model either with the full data set and train on the full data set, or train a model only with the negative part of the data set and test only on the negative part, or only on the positive, and vice versa, to see whether this hypothesis that like orientation of the head in our trained data actually biases the classifier, and that classifier is not going to generalize to orientation of the head, which are significantly different than the distribution that we saw during training. Again, the model is very similar to the model, to the task-specific learning model that I introduced before. Only this time we use manual annotations. Not we don't use anymore the automatic annotations for the voice activity detection levels. Again, and also another thing that we changed is that instead of using our own convolutional neural network or VGG16, this time we use ResNet 18 model for the encoder, and several fully connected layers for the classifier, not only one neuron. So there is only one main experiment. It's a speaker dependent, and what we wanted to test is the input type. This is the static or dynamic inputs. We want to test the masking level. These are the frames, the lines, the faces, and the lips images, so different types of input images. We want to test the partitioning of the data on the positive and negative head rotations, and we also wanted to test data augmentation. So essentially we just flip all the images from the positive data set, we just flip them horizontally, and all the images from the negative data set, we also flip them horizontally. This time we evaluated everything with F1 score. And here the results with full train set. So in this experiment, we train with the full set with all the, so both positive and negative head rotations, and different input types and different masking levels. So here are the frames. We get F1 score up to 98. The lines is a little bit worse. The faces is yet a little bit worse, and the lips performs the worst. These are the static inputs on the left side, but still the lowest accuracy we could get is F1 score that we could get is around 94 or something. For the dynamic inputs, we get similar results, a little bit worse, but in general, kind of very promising results for detection of whether that person, only one person, again, it's a subject for speaker dependent experiment. We could predict with very high accuracy whether that person is talking or not. However, and also, I forgot to mention, we have the full train, our test set. So here we train on the full data set, both head rotations, positive and negative included. And we vary also the test set in the testing. So either it's the full test set, so all the rotations, or only the negative head rotations, or only the positive head rotations. But this is where things get very interesting. So we got this really optimistic result, F1 score of 98. However, in this experiment, what we did is we test matched and mismatched train and test set conditions. And here, you can see down here in the legend, we have matched, the first two are the matched and the second two are the mismatched conditions. What it means is that in the match condition, we train either with only positive angles and we test only on positive angles, or we train only with negative angles and we test only with negative angles. In the mismatch condition is the opposite. Either we train with positive and we test on negative, or we train with negative and we test on positive. And this is where our where we find support for our hypothesis that like information about the spatial relation, the physical relation in the interaction is going to bias our classifier, because in the mismatch case we get a really significant drop all the way from 98 to 80, and this is consistent for all different masking levels and all different input types, whether dynamic or static. One thing to mention is that augmentation helps, but it doesn't really solve it. So augmentation is always better than not augmenting the train set. but it doesn't really solve the problem that we're facing here. But in all cases, it's actually giving us better result. And here I'm gonna get a little bit more into details. It's the same picture as here, but only this time we actually want to see exactly how, if we train on negative and test on negative, what happens and so on. So as we can see, there is no difference between whether we train on negative and we test on positive, or we train on positive and test on negative. They perform similarly bad compared to when we actually train on the in a match condition, where in the match condition we get very high F1 score. So one explanation for this model is not really looking at what we would expect, like a lip movement or a facial movement related to the speech activity, but it's also taking into account other information. And here we just visualize what the convolutional neural network is looking at. This is a Saliency map of which regions of the input image actually the convolutional neural network uses most for generating the label or the classification result. And as in the top row are images of somebody who is not speaking, and in the bottom the white circle are images of somebody who is speaking. But regardless, we can see that actually the network is using information even from the background. It's using information from the neck, which is expected because probably the neck moves with speech production, but it also uses a lot of information from the background to accomplish the task of classifying the speaking or not speaking state of the speaker. We have several explanations for that, and we are still going to investigate further. Please have a look at the paper to see what ideas we have to explain this phenomena. But just to summarize, I want to say that the global evaluation that we usually do, so we have this train set where we put all the data from the full distribution in our train set, and then we test on similar distribution. So this global evaluation turned out to be quite misleading in this case. So only mismatching the train and the test set is sufficient to really confuse the models. We see a drop of almost 20 points in F1 score. We saw that data augmentation helps, but the effect is limited. We also saw that input masking is actually counterproductive, and probably the reason it's counterproductive is that actually the network is using other information besides the face to perform this task better. Yeah, here I say models use information from the whole image. Also, we saw the dynamic inputs, they don't improve the performance. We believe that this is probably due to some noise which is introduced by the dynamic, the algorithm which is generating these dynamic input images. In the future, we would like to, we understand that this is still quite preliminary result because it's based only on one person and only on one data set, but we're going to perform similar analysis on more speakers to account, for example, for a person-specific bias, but like more rigorous like analysis. But we're also going to try to uncover similar spatial bias in other data sets and methods, not only this type of convolutional neural network.
Kalin?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the fact we've on the top of the hour, and we of course respect if people need to leave. I think you're wrapping it up in only a few slides. So for those of you who I hope many of you will stay behind. But of course, if you need to leave, that's absolutely fine. And I hope we'll do just a few questions afterwards. Thanks. Just wrap it up and we'll take it from there.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry for taking so long.
No worries.
Yeah. So future work is gonna involve looking into the data and generating synthetic data, or looking into first normalization procedures to get similar images to, these are the original frames, and then here we applied simple homography to like rotate the images a little bit. Also, future directions include multimodal architectures where we use more modalities, as I mentioned before, and we plan to look at different attention mechanisms to exploit like novel ideas for this problem. Finally, I would like to thank my contributors, which I list here on this slide. So part of the last part of the work is going to be presented at ICPR in a couple of weeks. And I thank you for your attention, and I'm really sorry for taking so long.
Absolutely, no problem. So let's ask if there are, if anyone in the audience have 1 or 2 questions. I think we have David House raised his hand. Will you help out, Marianne, and invite him?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah? Great. Okay, thanks a lot for this really interesting presentation. It's good to see you again, Kalin. My question involves what happens when people are about to speak and when they are about to be silent. So I was wondering if these models could help to detect the places of transition between not speaking and speaking, or between speaking and not speaking, and what would the potential be for this? And also, related question is, if you find any evidence, or if you can look at evidence that the models, or that they don't work as well in these areas of transition, so that there's a difference between the dynamic aspects of speaking through this. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, David. Well, we haven't we haven't looked at that, so I can't really say whether we can use. But yeah, because there is something that we discussed before with Jumpy when we were working on that. At least I personally have the feeling that even though the acoustics is kind of gone, so there is no the audio only voice detector is probably gonna output 0. This person is not talking. It seems like there is a still visual activity, like relaxation of the or preparation. So I mean, it seems to me that the visual voice activity starts earlier than the acoustic one and ends later than the acoustic one. I don't know if this answers your question, but we actually haven't looked at these transitions at all. So, but I think that's a very interesting topic, and maybe we should have a look at that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That's interesting observation, I think, too. Thanks.
Also, in addition, if you consider all the modalities that you've shown, not only the video, I believe you can do much better, because all this turn taking is, I mean, gaze, for example, is very important to determine who's going to talk next. So, yeah.
Well, I see a lot of benefit into actually doing this, not only multimodal, but also jointly, because at the moment, probably I didn't stress it enough, but we actually look at everybody like really independently. So we don't, we can essentially, in this 3-party interaction, the model can be so wrong that it can say all 3 people talk at the same time, which in reality probably never happens. So if we actually use this joint information about the interaction, that people actually probably not going to do that, or it doesn't happen that often in real life, we can actually get much better performance.
Thanks a lot, Kalin. Let's see if there's one more final question before we end this. Let's see if there's anyone else. And if not, I believe we are already past midnight in your end. So I'll just thank you again for making the effort, staying up late and giving this talk at this inconvenient time
It's
on a
pleasure.
very interesting topic, I have to say. So thanks again, and thanks to everyone on the call for your participation and also for staying behind. So thanks to everyone, and bye bye.
Bye bye.